Howdy, my name is Nonat, and I'm wearing headphones, which is not normal, and that's because I'm going to be doing something today that I don't usually do. I've only done a couple times in the past. I'm going to be reacting to another YouTube creator's video. I know. Don't get too excited. This isn't me throwing shade at someone. This isn't me heavily disagreeing with them. This is me who was halfway through watching a video and sort of talking to myself through the whole thing and thinking, I have a lot to say here. I should say it in a video because other people might find it interesting. So that's what I'm doing here today. I'm going to be reacting to How to Be a Great GM's video about the 4 worst styles of Game Master and how to avoid becoming one. There's a lot I agree with, there's a lot I don't agree with, so let's go ahead and go through the video and talk about it. By the way, you won't get to see the entire video through this one. If you want to see exactly what I'm responding to, check the link in the description to go give Guy a view. I highly recommend watching it first before coming over here because you won't get all of the context about what I'm responding to, just little snippets in here. Also, go support him. He's another great tabletop creator and we need to support that on YouTube. It's a great community. So without further ado, I would like to begin telling you about Sinclair's Library, the Kickstarter going live in mid to late March. Use the link in the description to join the mailing list, and remember, if you sign up for the mailing list and pledge to the Kickstarter within the first 48 hours of it going live, you will get a free Bandit dice set. Sinclair's Library is going to consist of 2 amazing books, the Codex and the Almanac, one for players, one for GMs. You will not want to miss it. Support it down below when we go live. Now, on to Guy.
So let's start with the one who thinks that they're actually a good GM style. The winner.
This is the really obvious one that a lot of people go for when they talk about bad GM styles, and I have to agree, the winner is a rough one. If you are playing to beat the player characters, you're doing it wrong, unless that's what your table wants. I know a ton of people are sick of me saying this, but I'm going to say it until I die. If your table likes the way you're playing, you're not playing wrong. If you sit down at a table of strangers and say, all right, you're level 1, here's a red dragon, I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, maybe you're playing wrong. But if your players like to be heavily challenged and really don't know what they're going up against, that can be really fun as a dynamic where you and the GM, it becomes a little bit more competitive, but it has to be agreed upon. You can't just go into this thinking, yeah, I'm gonna win today. But if the tone of the table is them versus you, it can be fun with enough pre-considered setup.
I felt after a while that my player characters just always beat up everything that I threw at them. So I needed to throw stronger, tougher, meaner, harder things at them because it started to become me trying to defeat them.
This is a very easy beginner's trap. Oh no, my players beat the encounter? It's weird, because that means you did it right. Now, if there was no struggle whatsoever, everyone's at full health at the end and no one used any resources, yeah, tone it up a little bit. But just because the PCs survived an encounter doesn't mean you did it bad, especially if the dice were just in their favor. But as a beginner GM, it can feel that way of, darn, I didn't kill one of them. It's a weird thing to think about, but as a GM, especially when you've been playing as monsters for the last 45 minutes of combat, it feels weird to lose and realize it's a good thing.
The other challenge that winner GMs have is that they are not afraid to use meta-knowledge. They will sit there and listen to what their players are plotting and then simply somehow allow their enemies, their villains, their nemesis, to just have that knowledge as well.
I cannot agree with this enough. Players or GMs, in my opinion, using meta-knowledge is basically cheating. I can't count the number of times that, a GM or a player will find out the AC of a monster and then take out-of-character precautions to make sure it works. A very big GM example of this is taking something that normally wouldn't be intelligent, something like mindless zombies not even being able to control, but not even able to comprehend free thought, let alone strategize, and these zombies start flanking and performing combat maneuvers and formations that don't make any sense just because it makes them more likely to hit and damage a PC. From a mechanical standpoint and the GM wanting there to be a threat, I understand it, but it's honestly kind of immersion breaking. But the same goes for players. You know, if a player comes up to a monster they've never met before, but the player knows what it's weak to because they've seen it in the bestiary, and they just happen to use fire on the troll, even though their character's never seen a troll before, it's still meta knowledge, kind of breaking the in-character knowledge. It messes with everything, in my opinion. I'm very immersion focused, so meta knowledge on either side is incredibly rough, and I just hate it. But also to the next degree, a GM using knowledge of the plans that players talked about in secret against them is really not okay. I don't know if you think you're clever, like, oh, they plan to go in the back entrance of the castle? Good thing all the guards happen to be guarding that entrance because they knew the characters knew the front was guarded. Don't use meta knowledge as a GM, don't use meta knowledge as a player. It's not fun.
Your players have now, or your player characters have become targets, and your players are now adversaries rather than friends sitting around the table having a collective experience.
Yes and no. Again, if your players don't know this is what you're doing, yeah, that's a problem. That's going to cause real-life stress from a fake imaginary game. But if that's what you're after, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I have heard tell, believe me, my comments love telling me about they're old school GMs who if you die, there's no resurrection, there's no dying system, 0 HP is death, blah, 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 blah. The GM doesn't punish you for every mistake, they're not a real GM. I don't agree with that gameplay style. A lot of people don't. But if your table does, more power to you. Just don't expect other people to like it because you do.
However, we can draw strength from the winner GM. You as the GM should not be trying to win, but your NPCs should be.
Yes. Plain and simple. There's not too much to elaborate on. It is important to get into the mindset of your NPCs, figure out what they want, how to achieve it, and how best to act upon the current situation to achieve that initial goal. It is not okay to feed your NPCs information they would never have. There's a lot of GMs out there who will just let the big bad evil guy scry on the party at all times, so that the big bad evil guy always knows what they're doing, is always one step ahead, and is always able to counteract the player's plans. And that's not fun. I'd say let your players be creative, let them have their unique solutions. Don't feel the need to, one-up them, especially if they put time into a plan. Nothing feels worse than potentially talking in like text chat outside of the session about a really cool plan, which of course the GM is also part of that text chat, and then the plan goes into action and the GM's like, nah, they expected you to do that. Like, don't do that, come on. The only exception to the rule I would have of this is if your players have an opportunity to know they are being spied on. If there is an NPC traitor in their midst, and there is a chance the players can deduce who it is, then by all means, let that NPC be feeding information to the big bad evil guy. If they bring the traitor in and are like, huddle up, we're gonna go in the back door of the castle, and the NPC's like, hey bad guy, then more power to you. As long as you gave the party a chance to figure something out and potentially stop it, then they have far less reason to be mad about the big bad evil guy knowing their plans, but don't just have them know their plans because it's better.
The player GM. Now, the player GM is a GM who really just wants to play. They don't want to GM.
We all do.
They want to be part of the action. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The player GM will create a GMPC or a DMPC, which is a GM-controlled player character. It's kind of anathema because the GM is already playing all of the other characters. So are they all GMPCs? No, they get this weird title of NPC. What's the difference? Oh, well, the GM takes special care of a GMPC.
This is a point of contention that I have a very unpopular opinion of, but bear with me. I do not dislike a a GMPC, whether I'm a player or I'm using a GMPC. What I don't like is the GMPC taking any spotlight from the player characters. Playing a GMPC properly is incredibly difficult. It requires a separation of meta knowledge that you as the GM have from this player character, and it requires you to be able to keep an eye on that player character without letting it intrude on your actual player's experience. The biggest example I have of this is what was his name? We were playing D&D First Edition just for fun, and they had a little healing alchemist with them, completely homebrewed in First Edition. What was his name? I think his name was Jared. I'm going to go with Jared because I can't remember. But Jared was just an alchemist they met in a town, and the party wanted him to come along with him. They liked Jared. Jared promised he could take them somewhere, and they were like, yeah, come along with us. And from that point, Jared became a pretty mainstay in the party. Now, Jared did not have a character sheet. Jared was not a PC in the same way, but he was a party member. He would be there in combat. He fired little healing darts with a crossbow, which was super fun, but he never jumped to the forefront. He typically didn't attack enemies. He was much more just there to support the party, help them decide on something, and sort of expand the party. So it was a 3-player party, so a 4th person in the actual party whole was nice to have, especially because they didn't have a healer. Now, there are way more ways to play a GMPC wrong than to play one right. Again, a lot of GMs, like Guy said, are trying to get in on the player action. They're trying to feel like a player in their own world that they already know all the secrets of, and for a lot of people, it's incredibly difficult to separate your knowledge from your NPC's knowledge. See the all-knowing BBEG from the last point. But if you can do it right, you can keep the GMPC in the party without being intrusive and keep their knowledge limited to what they know. It can be a really fun addition to the party, and it lets your players feel like they're growing stronger. If they get stronger, but the GMPC can't keep up, it can be really sad to be a heartfelt goodbye, which is what happened with Jared. They had to leave Jared behind because he was not comfortable taking on these grander and grander experiences as they reached level 7, 8, and higher. He was still basically like a level 2 NPC. I did not have him level up with the party because he's not a player character. So it was a really nice, drawn-out storyline where they gave him adventure, but eventually he was like, enough is enough. I need to settle down. Thank you. So it's tough. Maybe I'll make a video on it at some point. GMPCs are such a point of contention in the tabletop community, and they are almost universally hated because a lot of people do them wrong.
Well, the GM should be taking special care of every NPC because every NPC should be taking care of themselves to their best effect.
Agreed, 100% again, not to keep pausing the video, but yeah, every NPC should not be taken care of by the GM. They should be taking care of themselves. Every NPC, from an animal to a bad guy, is a living, breathing character who has goals, has aspirations, and has means to their own ends that they need to follow. They don't just fight to the death because it's a TTRPG combat encounter with some kobolds. No, if they see half their allies die, they should run. If they have an advantage, maybe they'll press it and they'll just take people's stuff and run away. But a lot of books, and I'm going to call you out on this one, Paizo, because it's a real problem. So many of Paizo's adventure paths have, this is an enemy, blah, 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 fights until it dies. And sometimes it's work. Sometimes it's a mindless undead. Sometimes it's an animated construct, once again, mindless. If it's mindless, that's totally acceptable. But something like a pack of kobolds fighting to the death doesn't make sense. And it just makes your world deeper when enemies start thinking about the ramifications of their actions. When a 5-on-5 fight a few turns later becomes a 2-on-5 fight, the two are probably going to run away.
What happens in those kind of situations is often the GMPC becomes very much a hero because they literally know everything that's going to happen and can anticipate and make decisions based on
and you just have to separate that knowledge and not do that.
We don't want that. We don't want to be in that kind of space.
Nobody does.
Now, there are times sometimes, and this is important, where if you have a smaller party or if some member of the group can't make it to that gaming session, where you might need to introduce a slightly more heroic NPC, a character who steps in and fills the gap in terms of the party dynamics, or who is a more important NPC, so a mentor or a love interest or a supporter
or a healer
or
supporter.
Something
there it is.
along those lines. So you can have more important NPCs, but they're not GMPCs. There's no need for them to be completely individual and have their own character sheets and their own statistics and all that kind of stuff. They need to have their own stats in terms of you using them.
Yeah, like a monster stat block, basically.
But they should never overshadow the player characters.
Okay, so yeah, me and Guy are on completely the same wavelength. We're calling an orange a mandarin, orange, mango, whatever. They're fruit metaphor. We're saying the same thing. Like, he's calling them stand-in NPCs instead of GMPCs. But yeah, my Jared by Guy's standards would be a stand-in NPC to cover a facet of the party that no one wanted to play, so why force them to? Yeah, makes complete sense.
They should never be more useful, more valuable than the player characters.
That, 100%. If you are taking anything from this segment, it is that. A GMPC or NPC or stand-in NPC should never be more important than a player character. In my opinion, nobody should be. Even if they're doing a quest for someone and that someone is along for the ride, like they're escorting someone, that quest should still never overshadow the players themselves. And that's sometimes a problem I have with pre-written campaigns, because unless you write your players into the campaign, it's not going to be about the players. So you really need to take that extra step with pre-written stuff to make the players feel important.
The not a GM. Oh my goodness. This is the one that terrifies me the most. I haven't seen it. And I had a friend who used to claim that he was not a GM. He did it because, well, someone had to GM and he kind of volunteered. Not a GM, they don't want to plan anything, they don't want to spend too much time investing in anything because they don't want to be the GM. And their NPCs is going to be shallow at best. I don't care about this village. Whether you come back to it or not next week, don't care because I'm not a GM and I'm not invested.
All right. Full disclosure, I have had sessions like that. I love GMing, don't get me wrong. Every day I say I wish I could be a player. The next time I get to play, I'm like, man, I wish I was GMing. But on the subject of, I don't care about this village, there have been days where, 20 minutes before the session, I'm like, oh, crap, I have D&D or Pathfinder tonight. Where are they? They're on travel. Oh, they've got like 13 more in-game days of travel. There should be a stop on the way. How about Towningshire, filled with dwarves who are there farming bees for honey? Cool, that's the town. I don't need NPCs, I don't need anything. Alright, they'll have fun. It'll be a good session. I can take a nap. So there are definitely moments. I'm curious, my players could probably tell when something like that happens. I'm usually pretty transparent with them anyway. But for us, because it's a single session thing and not a campaign-long thing, we're usually able to laugh it off. The players often help come up with things. A very, very casual thing that happens in pretty much every campaign I play in is a player asking, is there a bar in this town called, like, the Barbie? And I'll be like, sure, why not? And someone else will be like, oh, do they have shrimp at the Barbie? And I'll laugh, they'll laugh, the stove laughs, and we'll... Yeah, I'll be like, yeah, of course, there's shrimp at the Barbie, and we have fun. It's that collaborative storytelling, which leads me to a point that I just didn't even expect to talk about in this video. Don't be afraid to let your players GM a little bit. If they have a cool idea, sure, be like, yeah, why not? That exists now. That, for some people, might break immersion. But if it's the way your group functions, then yeah, no, it's a lot of fun, and I'm totally here for it.
Oftentimes, this is what happens, especially if you watch in feature films, second and third and fourth version of the film. So, they generally speaking, unless they're very good, get more ludicrous as they get bigger and more dramatic and more gigantic, and just the characters have lost value because now it's just about one crazy scenario after the next.
There's nothing inherently wrong with a campaign like that, if that's what you're into. For people who want a more serious campaign, more cohesive campaign, obviously, yeah, that's not going to satisfy that urge at all. But there are people who love just playing this game, doing ridiculous shit and then laughing every day. You know, there's all those tables out there. You order some pizza, you get some drinks, some beer, some wine, whatever, and then you just see what crazy stuff happens that week. It can be a lot of fun, maybe not for a weekly campaign, but if you're just a group of friends who gets together once a month to have a 3-hour adventure, there's nothing wrong with just making it little silly, almost like one-shots. Like, who cares if there's a cohesive story? This week, you're in a desert, and there's a giant cactus that's talking to people. Figure out why. You know, next week, you're in a rainforest. Why? I don't know. Let's just have fun. But, again, similar to the first point, your table needs to be okay with that. The communication is key, and if they're looking for something bigger and grander, you should probably try to deliver it, or change the campaign.
But we do sometimes want that fun, that spontaneity, that irreverence going.
Why am I making this video? Guy just says what I'm thinking.
Yes, you're trapped inside a giant ball of rock because of the spell. It is part of a bigger narrative. We're going to have a little bit of fun with that. So we do sometimes want that spontaneity, that enjoyment the GM brings in having fun.
Have a beach episode. Take it from me. I don't care how serious your campaign is. I don't care if it's in the middle of a nationwide war. Have a beach episode. Go to the beach, go shopping, go to the local hot springs, have a festival. It can develop so much character. Beyond just having fun as people, people having your characters do some somewhat wacky things. Oh, look, the super serious knight errant is out swimming and his boxers fell off because he failed his reflex save. That's hilarious. And that can be fun. But beyond that, seeing how your player characters react to these situations can develop brand new facets of their personality. If your entire campaign is serious, dark, and grim, there's not going to be a lot of chances to explore an entire other side of a character. How do these players act when things get silly? What is their sense of humor like? These beach episodes are such a good way to explore them. And they're fun. Like, they're just fun.
Finally, we have the actor.
Oh no. Is this going to be me and I'm not going to like it? This might be me and I'm not going to like it.
The GM who really, really wanted to be an actor but didn't, or, as I have had in some cases, are actual actors, and they're just using the game to basically act as another stage for them to perform on.
Okay, maybe not.
So they might have very complex NPCs, but that is so that they can get into the heart of the character.
There's definitely something there. There's definitely something that, I went to theater. I went to theater for college. I went to college for theater, so it's in my blood. I do like to act when I can, especially if I set up a very sentimental moment. It's nice to really get into it. And I will admit, there's part of me who, not like actively, I'm not wanting to think this, but there's part of me that thinks if I deliver an authentic enough performance, maybe I can draw the same thing out of my players. Now, a lot of the times I don't even try this because I know my players personally because they're close friends and I know how silly they are or whatever. But there are moments where I really try. And I'm not the kind of GM that will create like monologues. I'm not a monologuing villain kind of GM. I don't believe in that. But, sometimes I will have a couple lines and sentences specifically prepared for a GM to deliver, especially at a very heavy plot moment.
Whilst the player characters are around acting as, well, supporting cast, because the GM, who is an actor, wants to be center stage.
Okay, yeah, no, that's not me. There is a difference between performing your NPCs and, again, this is basically the same as the GMPC idea that Guy had. This is just the GM trying to steal center stage, like he said, trying to steal the spotlight, which is one of the biggest bads you can perform as a GM. It's just a big no-no. Let your players be the main character. They're there for a reason.
In other words, the actor GM is just there because they can do amazing voices, they can do amazing performances, they can run these stories which are always centered around their characters and not so much around the PCs. It also means that if the supporting cast try to be dramatic and heroic and start to steal the limelight, the actor GM will pull it away from them.
GMs! Hear ye, hear ye. This is going to be me up on my pedestal as my dog whines in the background. Yes, I know. Even she's upset. If your players are doing something cool, heroic, in character, or dramatic, Don't take it from them. I know, Ka. I know it's the worst thing. I don't know why I'm sitting like this, but maybe I'm just giving some kind of power posture. But no, if your players are actually doing something, like they're taking that step, especially, I cannot emphasize this enough because I've seen it happen and it makes me cry inside. If your character, if your player is usually quiet, if they're usually reserved, they're reactive, not proactive, but they step up and try to do something, for the love of gods, let them do it. These people who are usually quiet and reserved actually taking that plunge, that's a big deal for them. And if you tell them no, they're never going to want to try it again, because that can be embarrassing. Like, you might not think of it, especially if you're an extroverted person, but if an introverted, reactive person takes the step forward to make something happen, I'm sorry about her, it's okay. I promise she's fine. If an introverted person takes a step forward to make something happen, that is a risk for them. And if you squash that risk, it is going to deter them from ever trying again. Do not take that spotlight from your players. Please.
Whether you are a simulationist GM or whether you are a narrative GM,
both equally valid.
You want your NPCs to come alive. So you do want to draw from the actor GM that fervor, that desire to try and embody their characters. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that you need to be an actor, that you need to do accents and that sort of thing. Absolutely not. There are many games that I have played in with many GMs who don't do accents, who don't do anything along those lines. Same. They use descriptions. They use very powerful, created wordplay.
Sometimes, personally, that's even more immersive for me. Sometimes, even though I'm an actor at heart, if the narrative GM, if this GM is good enough with their words and descriptions, it can really draw me in and really get me to believe what they're talking about. Even if they're not using a voice, they're not using anything, and my dog will not stop whining. I'm so sorry. You don't need to be a Hollywood actor to be a great game master. Overall, guy, I think that's a fantastic video. There's a few things here or there that I don't agree with, namely just the GMPC being always bad. I don't agree with. I think it can be done well, but I think it is incredibly difficult to do well. As for everything else, he makes some good points. Hopefully I expanded upon those points and gave you guys a little more information, or at least some entertainment in watching a person watch a video. I don't know why that's popular on YouTube, but it sure is. So thank you, Guy, for making such a great video. Thanks to all of you for watching, and please don't forget to go watch How to Be a Great GM and subscribe to him while you're there. He makes some of the most quality, digestible content on YouTube. It's just so easy. He's got that soft spoken voice and just delivers the information seamlessly and in a very enjoyable manner. So thank you all for watching. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for supporting me in everything I do. If you would like to support the channel, there is a link down in the description where you can go to the No Net One's Patreon page, sign up, and if you pledge $10 or more, you get instant access to a ton of Pathfinder 2e homebrew, as well as playtest material for Sinclair's library, which, to reiterate, click the other link, one of the 3 or more links in the description, to go to the mailing list, sign up, and pledge within the first 48 hours to get your free Bandit dice set. That is it for me, because my phone is about to run out of battery, but thank you all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, No Nat Ones.